I had a question for any one of you, just about sort of what does the work actually look like? So you can talk about working on a file, for example. What does that involve, or what does that, sort of on a day-to-day sort of basis?
It depends very
varies.
much. It depends very much on where you are.
Yeah.
So if you're working on, there are jobs, for instance, working on specific programs. So let's suppose you're in the department of giving out wads of cash. And you have you're part of the granting program, which is big wads of cash to group X. So your job then is to be running this program, right? And when you run a file, so to speak, it'll be something related to that particular program. Maybe it'll be identifying who's in group X, identifying how much money is left in the pile of big cash that we're supposed to be handling. So there are all kinds of things that would be different there, right? Strategic policy jobs, and Mark mentioned this earlier, strategic policy jobs tend to be located in more central places and departments, and they work on quite different stuff. So they'll, what it mean, working on a file in that sense, sometimes somebody can literally hand you a file, but often it just means there's an issue. So you can be working in a for instance, you could be working on the auto sector, or an aspect of auto sector crisis, things happening in Ontario, Southern Ontario right now. And even if you're not part of a particular program, for instance, where I work, it's not uncommon that somebody in my group would get that as a file, meaning that's an issue to manage from whatever perspective we have. So, for instance, we have cabinet submissions coming in all the time, and we'd be managing the cabinet submissions related to that issue. Looking for any potential developments. Does the Prime Minister need to be made aware of a particular problem that's coming up? Do other senior public servants who support that issue need to get together to either discuss a problem that's going to come up, or discuss a different approach? Or do they just need to do a check-in? So we've already made some commitments. Do we need to check on the status of those commitments? So it just depends on the job itself. But some jobs are kind of crazy different every day, and others are more focused on a particular thing where you're really advancing one item.
Core tasks would, I'd say, revolve around writing. We do a lot of writing, and we communicate in a number of ways, but the primary means by which we communicate is either in the briefing note, which is essentially our advice and sort of context and you can brief up to the deputy, the minister, or the director general or the assistant deputy minister. And then we also communicate enormously by PowerPoint, which we call decks, and it's a crucial part of our overall communications within and without. So you spend a lot of time writing, and you spend a lot of time also meeting. And one of the things that's always interesting and sort of to get across to people is just how big the government is, and that's another sort of piece of that, is that one of the things we talk to candidates is that they have a fairly narrow perspective when they come in of saying, I work on I have a social policy background, and so therefore I think social policy at HRSDC is where I should go. And then what we can then say to them as well, there's a social dimension to public safety, there's a social dimension clearly in our Aboriginal policy, there's a social dimension even in D&D in terms of how we manage our forces and the social policies around how we provide benefits. And part of the reason we meet so much is because there is that, in that Venn diagram of interests, there is a huge amount of overlap between various groups and various individuals, and so you spend a lot of time trying to chat through issues and fighting over turf.
I used to be a research officer a few months ago, and one of the file that I work on was the Canadian Heritage research plan, and so it was totally research oriented. So the idea is to present for the whole department what kind of research needs we have for this year. For example, in arts policy, in heritage sector, or anywhere else. So it's possible to have. So it's my personal pass, and I know a few people in Health Canada, for example. They were hired for research needs in that particular department. So it's very possible to have a research career within the department, and so it's not a problem.
Yeah, and it would be a different hiring track then.
It would be a different hiring track than RPL,
Yeah.
and but there are distinct programs that are looking to bring in scientists specifically, or other sort of applied research areas. Agriculture Canada has one. The Department of National Defence has a specific applied research program. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but I'm sure they are there.
The post-secondary recruitment program at HRSTC, the same gradient that exists for policy exists for research. You can have very direct and applied research, and you can have abstract research. So, for instance, strategic policy at HRSTC has a research branch or a research portion that essentially does the research that supports strategic policy, which is a different sort of research than supports program policy. And so, in either way, you can continue to perform research functions within the public service.
Would you be able to talk a little bit about how the career trajectories differ for those different recruitment methods?
I think it depends on. There are some recruitment, as Mark sort of was talking at the very beginning, he said there's sort of policy generalists and then there's specialists. So those that distinction tracks the recruitment programs they have. We have generalist recruitment programs, which would be ours, is a very generalist. We don't care what your background is. If there's any policy relevance, we'll see if we can find you a home. Then there's other ones that are like the Accelerated Economist Training Program, for example, which, as the name may imply, looks for economists, which sort of tends to stick you in one kind of department, the Department of Finance or the Treasury Board or something like that. Or there's like the Department of Finance is an internal recruitment program, which is specific only to that department, or TBS has one, or the Department of National Defence has a policy program. But once you come into government, once you're indeterminate, once you've got your permanent job, you can go wherever you want to go, and the program that you came in through is less determinative of your career trajectory. It's more about the experiences that you want to get and the connections that you have or that you develop in terms of where you want to end up. So the program you come in through will probably have an impact on your career for the first year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe. After that, it's completely wide open, depending on where you want to be.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that our program has an overall goal of trying to significantly increase the policy capacity of the public service, and so a lot of our candidates have aspired to senior leadership roles, and we've been quite successful in having a lot of our candidates get to that level, but the demographics are working in everyone's favor to try and ensure that no matter what way you came in through there, if your goal is overall leadership in the public service, there are some spaces, but that also that there's a significant role for policy specialists, generalists, researchers.